Welcome to the Air Medical Today podcast. My name is Edward Ero, and I am your host for episode 34 on November 3rd, 2020. This podcast is part of the Ero Podcast Network, podcasts that inform by focusing on both the news and the people behind the news. With each episode of Air Medical Today, we explore a specific area of the air medical industry and community through the use of interviews. You can find Air Medical Today on the web at airmedtoday.com and on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. The podcast is indexed on iTunes and now YouTube as well. For additional information about the guests on the podcast, I also provide background data on the Air Medical Today website. If you would like to become a sponsor and/or leave feedback, please write to webmaster@airmedtoday.com or call 612-367-6052. Today, I am interviewing Mr. Michael Christianson, the Senior Executive Director of Sanford Air Transportation in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Before we get to the interview, I want to go over some feedback from the previous episodes and provide some general updates. The big news is that Air Medical Today is also a video podcast now. This is something I have wanted to do for some time, but now through some new tools such as Zoom and lots of testing and editing, it has become a reality. You can now either listen to the podcast as usual or watch it on the new Air Medical Today YouTube channel. The link to the channel is on the Air Medical Today website. If you have not listened to past podcasts, please take the time to do so. There is some really interesting information on how programs are reacting and adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as handling the stress that this has caused for frontline staff. You can also learn about other programs and how they are organized and operate. It is my pleasure to welcome Michael Christianson, the Senior Executive Director of Sanford Air Transportation. This includes Sanford AirMed, the Corporate Flight Department of Sanford Health, and the Maverick FBO Air Center. He has been in this position with various titles since 2008. From 1998 to 2008, Mike was the Chief Flight Instructor, Check Airman, and Fixed-Wing Pilot for Sanford Health, and from 1997 to 1998, he was an airline pilot with the Great Lakes Aviation United Express. Mike has a BS and MS degrees from the University of South Dakota in psychology and sociology for his undergraduate work and administrative studies for his master's. Okay, welcome to the Air Medical Today podcast, Mike. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today, especially since it's election day 2020, and it's also the expanding number of COVID cases that we're seeing. And it's also the 2020 Virtual Air Medical Transport Conference that I've been going to their sessions, and this works out just great as far as timing to do this recording. So welcome.
Absolutely. Appreciate the invitation, and one of my favorite subjects is our program, so we're happy to do it.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I first wanted to start, I always like to talk about the people at a program too, and especially you. You don't see too many pilots in charge of air medical programs, especially on the not-for-profit side, maybe on the for-profit side a little bit more. But, tell us about your aviation background. Has this been a challenge for you? And how did you have to learn about the clinical operations?
Yeah, interesting about air medical is it's taking two pretty highly regulated and skill-specific careers and combining them into one. We have the air part, and then we have our medical piece. And when I started with Sanford, that was in 1998, so almost 22 years ago. And I came in as a fixed-wing pilot, ran line operations for 10 years of just really strictly flying, with some other ancillary duties mixed in, with some Check Airman responsibilities and some Flight Instructor responsibilities. And during that 10 years, back when we were kind of a smaller organization, I decided I would go back and get my master's degree. So I did that through the tuition reimbursement program. And because I always had an interest in more than just flying, I love flying. I think it's a great career, and I was fortunate that it was something I was interested in from a really young age. And Sanford offered those opportunities, so I went back to school, got a master's degree, knowing I always wanted to get further my career, and just kind of waited for the opportunities and positioned myself for those when they showed up.
Mm-hmm. So you had so when you started with the program, you were a fixed wing pilot. Was that so? Just on the fixed wing side, you did not have rotor experience, correct?
Right. No rotor experience. At the time in '98, we had 2 King Air 200s and 1 helicopter.
Yep.
Yep. And we operated those solely out of Sioux Falls.
And then before that, I was reading your resume that you were with Great Lakes Aviation, which was United Express.
Yeah.
How long were you with them, and then what attracted you to Sanford?
Yeah. It was to rewind a little bit. I started taking lessons when I was 16 years old, still in high school. Got my lesson shortly after turning 17. Knew that the airlines is what I wanted to do for a career at that age. Finished college. During college, got my instrument rating. Upon graduation, did my commercial, my instructor certificates, and was teaching in Sioux Falls. And a Great Lakes pilot happened to stop into the flight school, who I knew, and had mentioned that they were hiring. So, well, I had 700 hours and was always gunning for the next opportunity. So I went that day. I drove to Spencer, Iowa, which was the headquarters at the time, and hand delivered a resume. And I remember dropping it off at the front desk, and she thanked me for doing so. And I left, got all the way back to my car, and thought that was kind of a wasted trip. I didn't really accomplish much. So I went back in and asked if I could hand deliver it to the director of operations.
Good for you.
She happened to say, yeah, he is free. So I delivered it. We had a nice conversation, and he hired me on the spot and put me in a class date. And it was really a great experience at Great Lakes. It's good flying. It's a lot of legs, a lot of trips, and it's flying in the Midwest. And I did that for a year and a half. I upgraded to captain, and about 4 or 5 months after that, as much as I enjoyed the flying, the lifestyle was tough. You're gone 20 to 22 days a month on the road, and I wasn't sure if that's where I saw the rest of my life going or not. I happened to bump into a Sioux Valley pilot at the time on a Great Lakes trip, and he had mentioned that they were potentially going to hire a couple of guys, which was very rare. There's very little turnover back then. So I decided I would put my hat in the ring and interviewed and was offered a position. And this is 1998, so this is when everything is getting ready to boom. The airline industry is going to explode, lots of jobs, great career. So I somewhat hesitantly decided to step out of the airline world and go into this air medical world. But now I can look back through hindsight, and 9/11 happened, huge upset to the commercial aviation world. The recession of 08-09, major upset, furloughs, layoffs, and now a pandemic. It's kind of the same story.
Yes. Yeah.
I know I would have been caught up in those 3 big events, potentially furloughed, without jobs, looking for the next job. And being here at Sioux Valley, now Sanford, we weathered all of those storms with never having a furlough or a layoff or a threat of losing a job, no going backwards in benefits. So it's really been such a stable, great place to have a great aviation career.
Yeah. I just before we leave Great Lakes United Express, where were you flying? Where were you out of?
I based in Spencer, Iowa for a while, and Chicago, so kind of the eastern part of their system through Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana. After upgrading to captain, of course, you're junior again, so then I was on the western side, so I was in Wyoming, doing kind of Wyoming, Colorado, some New Mexico.
Oh, I didn't realize they went out that far.
Yeah. So it was in the thing about Great Lakes was a lot of people like my age group. We were 23, 24 years old, and captain on these smaller twin turboprops, and it was just a neat culture being with those kind of the same like-minded people.
Yeah.
And so it was a good experience. I'm really glad I did it. And there are a few other, we call ourselves Lakers, that work here at Sanford that have gone through that same regiment. So it is a good experience.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right about the airline, was really booming. In fact, they were taking pilots from the air medical side, offering all kinds of bonuses, and now
Yeah,
all kinds of layoffs and, the number of flights and stuff has gone down quite a bit.
it's
Um,
about a 10-year cycle. Every 10 years, it seems like there's always a reset.
yeah. So, it's also on your resume, graduated uh, from University of South Dakota with degrees in psychology and sociology, and then I think went on to graduate school too in administration. So I think you partially answered this question because you said you had a real interest in an aviation even when you were before
Yeah,
college, right?
yeah.
So where did you go to flight school then?
Yeah, I did all my flight training locally here in Sioux Falls.
Uh-huh.
And when I went to the University of South Dakota, my plan was to do 2 years and then transfer to Southern Illinois University, where they had a dedicated aviation program. But I
Oh,
thought I'd get my generals done first, and then I would go do that to kind of keep the costs down. But after finishing my sophomore year at USD, I decided I didn't want to transfer and start over. So I finished schooling while taking flying lessons at the same time in Sioux Falls.
yeah, that's what I was wondering. So this was during school that you were doing that,
Right.
and also graduate school then too. We
Yep.
actually were working. Yeah.
Yep. And then I did actually did the graduate school here in Sioux Falls through the University of South Dakota, using at the time Sioux Valley Hospital's tuition reimbursement program. So my master's degree cost me nothing. We were a pretty small organization back then, and there weren't that many people taking advantage of it. So I
Yeah.
did it slowly, but took 4 years to get the master's degree completed, but definitely worth it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for explaining that. Because when I looked at it, I said, first, when I first got to know you, I didn't realize you were a pilot. I always assume people have usually a clinical background. Um, but, I've known that for years, but I didn't know your degrees, undergrad, more psychology and sociology. I said, well, geez, how in the world did you get into aviation? So,
Well, I think knowing that I always wanted to be in aviation, I knew to get in the major airlines, you had to have that 4-year degree.
uh,
The messaging was there are two piles of resumes, those with a 4-year degree and those without.
yeah.
If you want to be considered, you need to get it done. So at the time, I look back on this with probably some regret, but I was like, what's the quickest way I can get my 4-year degree done? And I figured it was psychology and sociology. I probably should
Uh,
have done a business school, but when we're young, we don't always look that far ahead.
oh, those were good degrees. I think a good background. My youngest son, I've been lecturing him on the same thing. Just get your 4-year degree, and I love your analogy that the pile with the 4-year and the pile with the 2-year makes a big
Yeah.
difference.
And then if you want to continue to advance in your organization, the piles get smaller where, a graduate
Yeah.
degree or just a 4-year degree. So you have to kind of always keep improving yourself, and you do that through education and experience.
So you went, uh, from fixed wing. How did you happen to become the director of the program? Or
Yeah, it started so after just like let's see here, 2004-ish, we had a turnover of program managers, and we had a retired general from the Air Guard come over to intensive air at the time, and I had applied for that position but didn't get it, which looking at someone with his experience and background, you can't feel too bad about that. But he was here for 4 years and knew that he was getting close to retirement, and through that time finished my schooling, continued to take on additional responsibilities in the organization that I was wanting this position and preparing myself and positioning for it. So then when he retired, applied for the program manager spot at the time, which was still our 2 airplanes, 1 helicopter, and went through that process and was awarded the position. And then shortly then after is when the expansion started. We had changed our name to Sanford because in 07 is when we got our donation from Denny Sanford. So that's when we did our name change. And then in 08, when I started the position as a program manager, we were just on the cusp of growing the footprint in the system.
yeah, because that came not too long after
Right.
you
It was
started. Then
like a couple months is when they
wow,
started talking about our merger with Fargo. So
right,
it all happened pretty fast.
yeah. So how many directors were there before you at the program?
I look back and to figure that question out there, I'm the fifth.
Fifth one. Okay.
Yep. So I haven't been too many since it began in 1977.
Yeah. And where does your position report within Sanford Health then? Who do you report to?
Yeah. So I'm considered an enterprise position since I have system responsibilities. So I report up to the chief nursing officer currently. I've had a couple different ones throughout the years, and which is really a good mix because she has a clinical background, and so that's a nice complement to my aviation background.
Mm-hmm.
And she's been very supportive and really a great person to report up through. And then one of the advantages of doing it this way is that it gives you a pretty short distance to the table of decision makers when we need to get stuff done. So it really is a good balance for us.
And is the CNO more operational?
Yeah.
The operations of the.
Yep. So enterprise responsibility again from the chief nursing standpoint, and which works well because we have responsibilities in all the same footprint.
Got you. So let's talk. We've touched a little bit. Talk about some of the history of Sanford AirMed, how you got that name, what the previous programs, that were included in that, and then how it all came together, where you're at right now with the program.
Well, so 08 is when I started my position as a program manager. And then in 09 is when Maverick Air and Sanford Health merged into what was Sanford Maverick Air. We had two flight programs. Maverick Air had a program under the banner of Life Flight, and Sanford Sioux Falls had theirs under intensive air. We operated like that for about a year and a half. And I think that's just part of the getting to know each other stages on what this merger is really going to look like. And I was always a proponent of one program, putting it all together. And the question was, how do we get there? And it kind of started with the fixed wing operation first. So they were using a vendor, and we had our own Part 135. So we went out and purchased two King Air 200s that were both based in Fargo, and that started in the fall of 2011. Shortly thereafter, we decided to replace our helicopter in Sioux Falls with an EC-145. And at that
what had you had prior to that?
We had a Bell 230.
Oh, okay.
And at that same time, we're as Fargo and Sioux Falls were still coming together, the Bemidji joined the system as well. And Fargo always had a real goal of putting an aircraft in Bemidji. So when that became under the Sanford system, we thought, well, now's a good time to do that. So actually within about 2 months, we purchased 3 brand new EC-145s. And those were put on the rotor wing certificate. And we, did the hiring of the pilots and the mechanics that basically all came from the vendor, which was PHI at the time, and started to put all those operations together, still operating as Life Flight and then as intensive air at the time. It was really Bismarck that came into the system in 2013, which was kind of the trigger point of, okay, Bismarck wants to have an aircraft for transport. Should we call it Life Flight or should we call it intensive air? Which one is it going to be? So that was really the time where we'd been together long enough. We're like, I really think we should just rebrand and start over, suits, our logo. And obviously those things come with some pain at the time when you're talking about people are very loyal to their names.
Sure.
I understand that, but we decided we will do new paint scheme, new brand, new name. And that's where Sanford AirMed began, was really in 2013 with Bismarck coming on board.
What's the process that you went through to get to that name? Did you?
We joined our leadership teams throughout the region. So we have base managers and directors, and we kind of went through, should we do Life Flight? Should we do intensive air? We looked at AirMed, of course. We did all kinds of thesaurus searches on the words for medical terms. And when the marketing department came up with the way the logo looks, kind of what the shows, the A swoops over, kind of showing motion and speed. We're like, really like the way that looks. And it really describes what we do. You don't want people to wonder what industry are you in? So we all agreed that AirMed was the direction we were going to go. And what we did it really from a best practice standpoint. So we took all the policies and procedures of, Sanford Intensive Air and those of Sanford Maverick Air Life Flight, and we divided them up. So we sat around a big table. We said, you're going to handle these policies, you're going to handle these policies, merge them together using the best practices from both, because
excellent.
We had a lot to learn from each other. Nobody did everything the right way, but together we really found our enterprise practice.
Yep.
And that's how we put them all together. And our CAMES accreditation was coming up. So we didn't want to do two separate CAMES accreditations. So that's when our first enterprise visit was in 2014. And that was a big undertaking, but a great project. We had help from the organizational accreditation folks to help us pull that all together. And it really got us all pulling in the same direction. And so that was when we received that first full accreditation, that was really a big win for everybody.
Yeah. That's interesting. I remember, when you did rebrand, and it is a process, especially in a merger too. People have loyalties to both programs. Right. Was the Merit Care Life Flight program, was that in existence before Sanford, or was it about the same time?
They first began in the mid 80s.
Okay, so they were after then.
A little bit after, and the Sioux Falls program was in 77 with a fixed wing.
Okay. Did they start out as rotor or fixed? Do you know?
I'm not 100% sure on which direction that went. I think they started rotor and then added in the fixed wing later.
Yeah. And then Bismarck, there was a program there that was offering services, right?
Yeah, Bismarck Air Medical still in Bismarck, and they had a partnership with Med Center 1 at the time. And then we kind of still used that partnership. They were still there to help, to assist and so forth, but then we had that one helicopter, and then soon after that added a fixed wing out in Dickinson.
Yes. And that was what, 2019?
That was 2014. Yeah. 2014.
Okay.
Shortly after our first CAMES visit is when.
Oh, that was, yeah. So that followed a lot of, what is the Sanford footprint then? Is it?
So, it's the largest rural nonprofit health system in the country. So it's like 260,000 square miles. It stretches into the little parts of Nebraska, northwest Iowa, south west Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota. Not much in the Wyoming area or Montana at this point, but it's really kind of that upper Midwest footprint. It's a large system, and that's why we kind of scattered our bases out with Sioux Falls, Bemidji, Fargo, Bismarck, and Dickinson.
Yeah, to serve the system. Very interesting. How is your medical direction done? Is there one medical director, or do you have multiple medical directors?
We do have multiples. We have a medical director in Bismarck, in Fargo, and in Sioux Falls. And that actually works really well. The specialties, we have the Bismarck and Sioux Falls medical directors are ED physicians, and then our Fargo medical director is a surgeon. And we have quarterly medical director meetings where we set our goals, review protocols, look at what the future is. And what we really found, when we first put this together, is we had different protocols. We used some different drugs. We started to look for the low-hanging fruit of how can we create some enterprise protocols where we do the care the same. And so we started with sepsis. And we were all, 95% the same. So with some tweaking, we made it, okay, that's the protocol that we're all going to use at all locations. And we've been slowly ratcheting down that list, doing that same process. And even with medical equipment, now we all use the same equipment and we use the same mounts, and our training is all the same. We use Ninth Brain, I'm sure, like a lot of programs do. That's kind of our hub for all of our education and quality and those types of things. So we've really been marching down that road of finding the best practices to do our patient care. So whether you call Sioux Falls, but we're busy and Bismarck should show up, you won't ever know the difference. We're going to look the same. We care for patients the same. We have the same goal, same mission. So it's been fun to watch that mature over the years, and we've really seen it flourish.
So what was the hardest thing to come to agreement on? Was there some blocks along the way that
yeah, oh yeah,
were a little bit more difficult than others?
I think we've always heard it takes 7 years to kind of change a culture and grow together. That's probably a pretty accurate number.
Yeah.
What really makes it all work, though, is the leadership. We have base managers at each base location, and they're usually a background of an RN or a paramedic. And we have a clinical director who's enterprise responsibility that has a paramedic background. And honestly, we all care about the same things, and we all want the same thing. It was just a matter of how do we bring that all together so that we all feel like we feel heard and that we're all included in this process. And the name was probably one of the biggest ones to get over, and not for me, because I was really more excited about the new name than I was concerned about giving up an old name.
Yeah.
But through the years now, that's this is our identity, is Sanford AirMed, and I think everybody feels that way. Some of it's through attrition, and some of it's just through people that have been here long enough to know that, yeah, this is who we are now, and we're better. But yeah, there were definitely some roadblocks. But having just done our third CAMES accreditation as an enterprise, you can just see the progress and the growth. It just shows in our survey, and it's really a true way to quantify the work that we've done is through that outside source coming in to look at you.
Yeah, it's a good way.
Things. Yeah.
Yeah, mergers are not easy. I've been through a few of them myself, and I think you're right. It takes some time. I think you're lucky in the sense that they're all under Sanford. I mean, the organizations have merged. I did one in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and they merged the flight programs, but not the hospitals. So you still had that in the background, and that took maybe a little bit longer, but the flight programs did come together, and CAMES was one of the unifying things. You're absolutely right on that.
It does. I think that outside perspective helps.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about your administrative staff. Talk about so the positions that you have. You said you're base managers and a clinical manager overall.
Right. So like as an example, every Monday morning we have a weekly check-in with our AirMed leadership team. And, at that call every Monday morning, we have our director of operations for the fixed wing, director of operations for the rotor wing, our safety officer, communication center supervisor, enterprise clinical director. We have a base manager in Sioux Falls, one in Bemidji, one in Fargo, and the Bismarck covers both Bismarck-Dickinson. And that our leadership team is made up of that core group, and also directors of maintenance. And that's just kind of where we check in every Monday morning to make sure nothing over the weekend that we need to be aware of. What does the week coming look like? And I think that open line of communication and that consistency really makes the team communicate well together. And that's just our one check-in together. Then there's, tons of meetings and phone calls going on in between each other throughout the weeks.
Does your base managers, do they fly too, or is it a full-time job?
It is a full-time job. Some of them do fly. I personally still fly as well, doing air ambulance. And I do think it's a nice mix. I've always been a believer that the things that we think of in meetings and ideas and policies and procedures that we think sound great sitting around the table doesn't always transfer to the aircraft.
Good point.
So I've always enjoyed to go out and fly and watch some of these things, and I can look at some and be like, that works really well, and some that just doesn't really work, does it? We really need to rethink that. Yeah. So I like being able to do that.
Yeah, I didn't realize that you were. So you still fly fixed wing flights every once in a while.
Yep.
Wow, that's great.
Quite a bit. We fill. I'm not a scheduled pilot, but I do fill in sick calls, vacations, or if we're short staffed. I try to get to all the bases to fly, because you really find that it's fun, and they like to. You think that they maybe wouldn't want to see us show up, but they do like to see you show up and see what they do. They're proud of it, and it's been enjoyable.
Yeah, my background's more administrative, so I don't can't fly an airplane or do clinical work. But I always my favorite thing was to fly along with the crew. I'd call it management by flying around, rather
Yeah,
than
right.
the business term of walking around. But you really see. I always said you really see the crews doing what they do. I mean, if you just go visit at the base, it's a lot different than watching them actually do it in a transport.
Oh,
So,
sure.
um,
I'm always so impressed with the work everybody can do, and
yes,
their
yeah,
skill sets, and how they manage challenging patients in a pretty small environment with noise and
yeah.
snow, it's cold, and all those other things that we deal with, and just how they work together as a team. But yeah, I would never give that up.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'd always like, you get the call. I'd like spend time at each base and then go fly, but they would have the information they have and what was going through their process and their communication. The clinical
Yeah.
staff with, okay, here's what we're preparing for, and that's not always what ended up to be. And then watching them adjust to that, and adapt.
Yeah, they do pretty amazing work.
So, do you have other staff at headquarters, or are there what
Yeah,
else?
we have an assistant, of course, that helps out with the day to day and billing and so forth like that. But
Mm-hmm.
really, it's made up of uh, our clinical side of the house and our aviation side of the house, and we are very intertwined in our day to day operations, so that we aren't forgetting something or something is being left out. Like, I think one of the biggest things we have to do that really spotlights that relationship is any new piece of medical equipment. Seems like we get a piece of medical equipment and it's either outdated or not supported, or we're switching to something else. And it seems easy to think, oh, I'm going to change this pump for that pump. Well, if you bring aviation into that too late, well, there's certain mounts and there's
Yes, right.
EI testing and there's all kinds of things that have to happen with
STCs, yeah, right.
every piece of equipment. So we had some hard lessons in replacing equipment, and we finally have a solid process for how we communicate to do that, so that it's done right up front and we're not playing catch up. But we really do. I mean, the maintenance department working with the clinical staff is really, really improved, and it's all been good things.
So, do you do your own billing and reimbursement, or is that done through the hospital?
Kind of both. We do post our own charges.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, a skill I picked up recently when our Sioux Falls assistant was on vacation. We had no one to back her up, so I said, "Okay, teach me how to do the billing."
Jeez.
But I feel like this is something I should know how to do, because it's going to really give me perspective on billing. So I learned how to do that. So we actually post all the charges and put all those things in Epic, and then the hospital takes it from there when it comes to accounts receivables and those types of things. But yeah, we do. It's in air medical building is not too challenging. There's only a handful of codes to worry
Yeah,
about, and it's
yeah.
pretty straightforward stuff. But
Do you get
we do.
involved with follow up though if bills are rejected and
No, that's where the hospital works on
hospital?
that part of it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of nice.
So, is that posted to your on? Are you pretty much managing expenses, or do you see the revenue part of things?
Both. Yeah, revenue and expenses hit our budgets.
Okay.
And, we do manage both and project the revenue side, and control our expenses and that type of thing. So yeah, we do it all.
Okay. So, not counting, inpatient revenue from a patient that gets transported in, are your operations budget neutral? Are you adding to the bottom line, or are they?
Yeah,
Or do you think they're subsidized?
yeah. We all three. It depends on but I would say that as we've grown, and if you look at all the new aircraft we bought, well, we had mountains of depreciation expense for quite a
Yes.
few years.
Yeah.
But we've had them all long enough; they've all depreciated out. So now we see that we do contribute to the bottom line, and not only cover our own expenses, but then add revenue to the system. And
Yeah.
but it was a long road coming to get there because it's an expensive operation. Between, the payroll side, it takes highly skilled people and quite a few of them to keep everything going 24/7, 365. You have your maintenance side, keeping the aircraft in service, fuel, and all those types of things, certifications, training, education. But yeah, we are now have kind of turned the corner and contributing, it feels good for us. I think people take a lot of pride in that. We're not just bringing patients in, but we are a profit center as well.
Yeah. Does you? I think my experience when I've been with hospital-based programs is people don't really understand how the program works. They're used to the inpatient or even outpatient services and how revenue is done. Is that, have you had to do some explaining in meetings, or do you get involved with that, like within
I
the
do
hospital?
get involved with that a lot. We're a very conservative organization, so we watch budgets very closely, I'm sure, like most.
Yeah.
So we have to explain how these things work. But they're all very smart people. Our finance people are very intelligent at what they do, and they're also very helpful for what we do when it comes to budgets and how we should budget. But yeah, there is always some explaining going on. But the one thing that's never ever happened have been questioned is what we need to spend on maintenance to keep the aircraft maintained at the highest level. The training we do for clinical and aviation staff. I mean, those things are go without question. And because of that, we treat it very responsibly as well. We're very good at how we do our parts shopping and the programs that we operate under for Power by the Hour and those types of things. So,
Yep.
Yeah, we treat it like it's our own.
Yeah, that's good. So you had some independence. I think sometimes if you're completely hospital based, there's a lot of misunderstanding about, well, I saw your staff down in the lunchroom and they took longer than the necessary break, and it's just, well, they just came back from a 2-hour flight.
Right.
And,
no, yeah, thank goodness we don't operate under that kind of microscope.
Yeah. So you had mentioned your bases. So how many, talk about the rotor and fixed wing bases again, where they're at and what aircraft are located where again?
So we have 4 King Air 200s for ambulance work. 2 are based in Sioux Falls. 1 is in Dickinson and 1 in Fargo.
Mm-hmm.
4 helicopters, all EC-145s now. 1 in Sioux Falls, 1 in Bismarck, 1 in Fargo, and 1 in Bemidji. And all the pilots, all the maintenance personnel are all employees of Sanford Health. And we staff our fixed wing with 2 captain qualified pilots. And at rotor wing are staffed with 1 IFR qualified pilot. And we are IFR approved and do IFR operations in the rotor. And each base, then, of course, we fly with nurse paramedic on standard trips, but we also have specialty teams with maternal, neonatal, and pediatric. And
do the staff, are there pilots that fly both helicopter and fixed wing, or is it pretty much one or the other?
People that are qualified to, but we only let them they only do 1.
Okay.
Kind of pick. We've got a couple that have a lot of King Air experience and rotor experience, but they pick, I'm going to do rotor.
Got you. And how about your clinical staff? Do they move from fixed wing and rotor?
Early in the operation, they would move around from base to base. It still happens sometimes, like between Fargo and Bemidji, because they're pretty close together. So there will be some crossover. There's some schedule holes that need to be filled, but not a lot of that anymore.
Okay.
And the pilots will do it, same thing. Go to Dickinson and help cover some shifts. That happens both rotor and fixed wing.
Yep. And then, so you own all the aircraft now?
Yep. Sanford owns all the aircraft. Mm-hmm. And, coincidentally, we're also working on the next 10-year projection.
Yeah.
They don't last forever. And
10 years is usually the time frame.
And it's such a capital intensive department. You can build entire clinics sometimes for the cost of purchasing a new helicopter.
Right.
So it's getting everybody to kind of start thinking about that ahead of time and looking down into the future, being like, what should we be doing to prepare ourselves to replace this first aircraft when it is time, and what is the right time to replace that aircraft, and how do you quantify that? What's the metric? So we're having those conversations. We bought these helicopters in 2011, so we're about 9 years, and they're heavily maintained every day, gone through with maintenance. I mean, they're great aircraft. We do fly a lot of hours, so we're kind of thinking, and what is that right number, and working with Airbus on some of those questions. And same thing with our King Airs. You know, there's great aircraft, and they're hardy, and they can take a lot of abuse, but there is a time when we should probably part with it and replace it with something that's less maintenance intensive. We're about being in service and being available. If we have aircraft that are out of service for unscheduled maintenance a lot, well, that's not really supporting the mission.
What do you look at a time frame on a King Air? I mean,
well,
it's longer than 10 years, isn't it? Right?
Oh yeah, we have one we bought new in 1995.
Yeah,
and it's to the point now where we are working on the replacement, as we speak. And so 25 years, 26 years,
yeah.
You can pretty easily do that with the King Air.
Yeah.
And like I say, they're like that good old farm truck that you jump in it, hit the key, it runs, and it runs well, and it's really good for our mission.
And helicopters, you're looking at 10 years? Is that what you're...
Yeah, I bet we'll be 10 to 12. I think, you get around that 10,000 hour mark. That's a good time to be working on the replacement. And most of that is not because the aircraft becomes unsafe. It just becomes more time intensive. All aircraft, deal with, fatigue and cracking, and the cracks aren't, like something is coming apart, but it just requires a lot of downtime, a lot of maintenance. Right. So you have to look back and think, is this the best aircraft for our mission anymore, or is it time to move on to the next one? So it's a delicate balance to find that right time.
And you've been with Airbus now for quite a while. Is that still?
Yeah, 2011, and I can tell you the 145 has been a great aircraft for us. It's a good IFR platform. We love the clamshell doors for loading and unloading. It's a really good aircraft for our mission. And we looked at all of them. We traveled looking at Leonardo, and we looked at Sikorsky and Bell, and all great airframes. We just had to figure out what works best for our size of team. On the specialty teams, we bring 3 people a lot with respiratory care or nurse practitioners, isolettes, and all that. So we really felt like the cabin size and the capabilities were right up our alley.
Yeah, it's been, throughout the history of aeromedical in the U.S., that's been the ship, the BK 117 and
right.
The EC 145 have been there. You had air operators previously before the 130 your Part 135, correct? I mean,
yeah. So when this all very first started, like the local FBO did the fixed wing aviation program, and then Sanford decided, or Valley at the time, to take that in-house because they wanted to have operational control on the safety and how we did things and our training. And when the rotary program entered the scene, that was like 84, and that was the Rocky Mountain helicopters. And they were actually the vendor all the way up through 1998 when we put them on our own certificate and went with our own pilots, own crews, own maintenance.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a pretty long time there we were at the vendor relationship, which was just fine. There's nothing wrong with doing it that way. I think that it just the size and scale was, let's bring this in-house, get the right people in place to do this, and have ultimate operational control over how we want to do business.
Yeah, so you did that early on compared to a lot of programs that were.
Yeah, I think it was a cycle, right? Because everybody kind of did on their own, then they did it the other way with the vendor relationship, and then now you see more people flipping back.
Yeah.
Just as real program is now, going back to your 135, which it's a major undertaking.
Yeah, it is. I know.
Once you get there, you just kind of have your own operational control culture.
Yeah, I've Kalamazoo was for me was a 135 program.
Yeah,
and they have actually not recently flipped to a vendor. I think it was about a year ago or so. Which was interesting, but a smaller program. And of course, Lifelink just recently going to
Right.
their own Part 135, and I think other programs have been looking at that too. What was Merit Care? Was that
So Merit Care was tendered by Fargo Jet Center, did the fixed wing operation, and PHI Helicopter was doing the rotor.
Oh, it was PHI. Okay.
Yep.
I thought it was Air Methods at one point. No.
Yeah, I don't believe Air Methods was.
Okay.
They were PHI a long time, and good companies. We just had to pick a direction.
Yep.
Brought them on the 35.
Does Sanford, do you have ground ambulances, or is there an ambulance division within Sanford Health?
There is. So FM ambulance is under the Sanford umbrella. That's Fargo Moorhead. So that's a 911 service.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And then there are ambulances that are under the Sanford umbrella in Laverne, Minnesota, Canton, South Dakota, Wheaton, kind of towns sprinkled throughout Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota. But then, for AirMed, we do have our own ground trucks to go back and forth from the hospital to the airport. And that's really the only mission of those trucks, so that we can have them there when we want them and not have to rely on them.
Oh, I didn't know. Yeah. So you don't, if you're down for weather, you don't.
No, we have relationships with the local services.
Okay.
Trips for us, we'll call and they'll come pick us up and take us. And in Fargo, of course, we're calling Fargo Moorhead Sanford Ambulance to do those trips, but here we use MedStar in Sioux Falls.
So what is, on the clinical side, what is your, well, let's talk about pilots too, but what's your staffing model for the rotor and fixed wing? You've got, is it a nurse medic model?
Nurse medic on all those trips, fixed and rotor. We do have respiratory care available out of the bases, not all the bases, but most of them, where they're supporting a medical center. And then for maternal, we'll bring maternal RN. And of course, for neonatal, it's very specific. So we bring, neonatal RNs, CMPs, respiratory care, and the isolate and so forth for those types of specialized care trips.
Do you have both your crew on those, or you just take one of your crew?
Just one. Yeah. But it's nice having the full array of specialty teams to offer that service. So we really like having those. They're great, and they're busy.
Yeah. And so, and then pilots, you said it was one single pilot?
Single pilot and rotor wing. And we do, actually, the fixed wing is two pilot. And this is one of those things that started long before my time, but everybody's is a captain. So we don't really fly captain first officer. It's always captain. Now, on the schedule, your duties are delineated by if you're listed as captain for the day, and then there's a co-captain, so you have different duties.
Yeah.
But everybody's ATP rated, captain qualified, and it's just a matter of how we switch names on the schedules. And we've been asked about that before, like, are you thought about single pilot, or you thought about, having first officers? And we thought about all of those things. But this works. It works very well, and we don't see a need to change it this time.
Yep.
But the pilot shortage was getting very real before the pandemic, and like I say, it's always that reset. Now it kind of floods the market with more qualified pilots.
You probably have, you don't have any issue right now, do you?
Not right now, but we had positions open for well over a year, trying to find the right fit. And that's kind of where our bus management pilots fill in all those schedule gaps. And we've decided that it's definitely worth waiting for the right candidate to fill those seats than just trying to hurry up and fill one. So we did take our time, and now we're fully staffed and great crews.
So in your clinical, you have a clinical manager that manages all the clinical operation, correct?
Yep.
And then on your aviation, same way, but do you have it split between fixed wing and rotor?
Yep. So we actually have two Part 135 certificates. So one
you do?
Strictly the fixed wing, and one is strictly the rotor wing. So we have a separate director of ops on each, directors of maintenance, and they're responsible for their certificate and those responsibilities that come along with that. And that happened about 06, 07, And as we've gotten bigger, that's turned out to be, I believe, the right decision for us, just based on if you had any type of issue with either mode of transport, it might cause you to pause or put a certificate on hold. The other one would still be able to operate. And as we've gotten bigger to add more aircraft, it just gives us more room to grow. There's operational control center considerations and those types of things, but it's given us flexibility.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, because I didn't know that, but two, you have to have similar positions, so it's probably
there is that little bit
more,
of it, but
more costly to do that.
And the directors of operations are line pilots as well, so they do fly, and I think that part's pretty important too. So we're not just, like you say, overwhelmed with administrative. They have different roles.
Yeah, it seems like even some of the big operators do that differently. I know Air Methods try to do everything under one Part 135 certificate, and some of the other ones would have multiple ones. So there's probably
it's worked. There's such specific types of aircraft, and they're very different. We found that having the right people with the right expertise for the right type of aircraft has worked well, and so far it served us well.
Yeah. So what innovations have you seen in clinical operations over the years? I mean, what types of things have you added?
Always a lot of change with interiors, isolates. We do carry whole blood. That was a new change we recently made. We've carried blood for years, but now we just made the switch to whole. Kcentra is a new drug that we started to carry that we actually did some education on for other areas. And it's really been interesting to watch our medical directors work together to keep elevating the type of clinical interventions we can do and the care that we can give. And so it's been pretty progressive. And when we did our last interior, we used LifePort. That's the interior that we use. And Hill Aero is our modification center that does the work for us out of Lincoln, Nebraska. And when we bought an aircraft in 2008, we bought a new King Air at that time. That was brand new. And when we did the interior, we wanted to find new ways to mount equipment that was as safe as it could be, approved, pull tested, G-loaded, tested. Because a lot of times you put a lot of equipment on a bridge, which isn't certified for a certain amount of weight. So that's where we worked with Hill Aero to create this overhead Cerviplex with a mounting system in it, so that all the mounts passed all of the G-loading and pull testing required by the FAA, and everything had paper on it, if you will. That's kind of the language they use, where it's certified and approved. So we've done a lot of work with Hill Aero, which now you see in a lot of other aircraft. Since they were kind of the engineers behind it, we were just the ideas. The one not tied to clinical, but loading ramps. So they were heavy, and you're bent over in a small aircraft. They're like 33 pounds, and they're kind of cumbersome. So we provided Hill Aero with some seed money to say, make us a lighter loading ramp. And through their engineering, they knocked 33% off the weight of the ramp, which turned out to be a lot. It's carbon fiber now. They went as far as drilling out, the nuts and bolts so that they sell the strength, but not the weight, and really pretty cool. And now you see they sell them to everybody. But our director of maintenance is pretty progressive on finding new and better ways that are safe, cut weight, make it easier on everybody's backs, loading and unloading patients. And so I feel like we've been pretty progressive in kind of how we do business. And I think that Hill Aero has taken a lot of those things, and now you see it everywhere.
Yeah, that's great. It's neat to be involved in that way.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I mean, they have the engineering on their end. We're really just the people that are in the weeds. Like, here's what we would love to see. Could you do this? And then they make it happen.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit. COVID-19 has been a big impact here in 2020 for all of us, and certainly affected our program. Seems like the number of cases just keeps going up. Yeah. I know the Dakotas are getting hit hard, Minnesota, Wisconsin. How has it affected your operations there, Mike? And how many?
I think our effect is probably similar to almost everybody else out there doing this. Is we didn't really know what to expect or how to handle this, and I think the language and the guidance changed almost daily. from PPE
Yeah,
requirements.
initially, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was just kind of like everyone's, I think, scratching their head every day, like, what are we supposed to do when we have a patient? Do we glove? Do we not glove? Do we mask? Do I have to wear an N95 or just a surgical? Or is it surgical with an N95 or a N95 with a surgical over it? Gowns. But once we finally got a process in place to protect our patients and our team members, we found that when this all started, it was really slow for a while. Nothing was going on when this first happened. It was probably the slowest months I've ever seen as far as transport goes. So we were just kind of wondering, well, how long is that going to last?
Yeah.
And now we've seen kind of the inverse of that, where it's gotten extremely busy again. And I can look at how we have transported in the hundreds of COVID patients now, and the way the teams do their PPE and protect the patient, it's really almost quite incredible the little bit of exposure that has happened to team members that are doing it. And they do incredible work protecting themselves and the patients. And it's been an impact, but I think like everything, we learn how to handle it and to communicate, and then we press on.
Yeah,
And do
I mean, whole new light on what universal precautions
yeah.
were, how we handled that in the past.
Yeah.
So have you seen, are you seeing an increase in the number of COVID patients that you're transporting now from
Yeah,
outlying areas?
we have seen an increase in those numbers, and the hospitals, of course, have seen more COVID patients on the
Yeah,
inpatient side. And um, like you say, you wonder where the valley starts again, or where the peak starts. But um, I think we take each one as it comes, and everybody does what they need to do each time that call comes in. And I anticipate it will continue like this for a while. I don't see a major slowdown coming.
doesn't look like it. I mean, it's the
No.
numbers just keep going up, and then you just saw what England, France, Germany are all
Yeah.
sort of locking back down again. Um, and
Right.
it's sad that it's gotten so politicized in this country, which it shouldn't be. You know, it's really a public health
Right.
thing.
Right.
So you have a couple different things that most other flight programs don't, and I wanted to let our listeners know about that. I know this about you, but I wanted you to talk about it a little bit. But you have a corporate flight department that you're in charge of. Uh, have these operations always been under the director, or did that change happen later?
Yeah, that was all started with our department, and I've always been in charge of that area. And it started with
Interesting.
the one King Air, and the reason we went with the King Air 200 is we had four others, so we know how to manage and take care of King Airs very efficiently. As the system grew with Fargo, Bemidji, Bismarck, and into the western side of North Dakota, it's a long way. It's an 8-hour drive to Dickinson from Sioux Falls. And so how do we effectively have people with enterprise responsibilities get to all these locations in a meaningful way without spending 3 days on the road for a 2-hour meeting we try to do in person? So it made sense to put that first King Air in service, and that's been operating. We still have it. I think it was back in 2014 we did that. Then it turned into some more of a benefactor type setup where we were donated a citation by a gentleman in town. So that airplane came to us with a hangar and all the stuff that came with it. So like, okay, well, we have this airplane. Let's get pilots trained to fly it. So we did that. And then it turned into another jet that was donated by our benefactor, Sanford. And same thing. Let's see what our utilization looks like and what we need to be doing. And as Sanford has grown, they've also been out into other things outside of healthcare. So we have a sports complex. We have the Sanford International, which is the Champions Tour PGA event. So a lot of those events and all that growth and Great Shots, which is similar to Top Golf, is a Sanford brand now. Require a lot of travel, a lot of meetings, a lot of looking at things. So that's kind of how the jet started to intertwine into the works. And because we already had an aviation maintenance department and we have pilots. It was really just making the aircraft operational. So it was not an expensive adventure to get into. It would just seem like the next logical step to move people so that they can do their jobs. And it's really a quality of life issue for a lot of positions where in order to maintain this level of responsibility, I have to be able to get around. So
Yeah,
we can
plus there's
partner, or we can pay for it, or we can pay ourselves and do it internally.
yeah.
And we recently added a fourth airplane, another King Air 200 in Fargo, which has been heavily used for precision outreach. So we do a lot of that out of Sioux Falls and in the Fargo area. So right now we have 4 corporate planes, 2 King Airs, a Citation, and a Falcon.
Wow.
But we only have 9 pilots, so we don't staff them all full time. Like I fly on the corporate side as well. And for me, it works great. If I need to get to do a base visit, I can take a pilot's seat and go to Bismarck if I need to. So it's worked out really well. We use them very efficiently. We fill the seats. So there are a lot of people that need to get around. So if there's a trip going to Fargo tomorrow, there's only 2 people scheduled. We open it up and 6 seats available to go to Fargo tomorrow if anybody wants to go. And people, oh yeah, I need to get up there. That's been great. And so it really works well. When Fargo and Sioux Falls first merged, we had 2 buses every day that went back and forth, kind of working on the relationships and getting people together. And those eventually went away, and we drive a lot still. There's still a ton of driving that goes on, but it's really made operations more efficient.
It's interesting. I think most programs don't have that type of responsibility. And I didn't realize you had 4 aircraft. But if you look at the area you're serving, it's a little hard to fly commercial. It's
almost impossible. I've tried. Like I go to Dickinson to help cover shifts, and I looked at the airline flights, and it's an entire day. So like, well, I guess I'll just take an entire day to drive up, an entire day to drive back, and but when there are other people that need to get around for meetings, board meetings, those types of things, or we've had emergencies pop up. We got to get here right now. Well, it's a phone call. We're off the ground as quick as they can get to the airport. So yeah, it's been a real tool, and I think it's really made us more mobile.
Can you switch out the aircraft from a corporate to a?
They're all corporate.
Yeah, so that you don't use them. What about for transplant teams?
They're not on our Part 135, so we can't do any for-hire operations with them right now.
Oh, that's right. So it's all 911.
We have looked into that option, but in our conversations with the transplant teams, they were pretty well serviced in this area.
Okay. So the other, I think, innovative thing that you're doing that I haven't seen anywhere else is that you acquired an FBO in Sioux Falls. Tell us about that and how has that benefited your operations?
Yeah, so as we grew the corporate department with the ambulance department, we had one small hangar where we were trying to live out of, which we were bursting at the seams. So we built a new facility on the other side of the airport next to Maverick Air Center, which was the second FBO at Sioux Falls. And the investment group that had purchased it was interested in moving on and approached us about buying it. After doing our due diligence and thinking about our aviation operations, the amount of fuel we buy, and the idea of being able to control our fuel pricing to a certain extent. And kind of on top of that was, FBOs also service the community. And if you want a good business community, you have to have a good aviation airport, good general aviation. So we did purchase the FBO, and it's been kind of interesting. When I was in college, right, or a graduate, I worked the line department at the FBO in Sioux Falls back then, and I was fueling and tugging airplanes. It's a great way to learn about all those things. And the guy who had hired me, Bruce Goodwin, was the vice president at Maverick. So it was kind of like a little bit of coming home. Some of the guys that I worked the line with way back in college were still working the line now, and super experienced, great people. So it was almost a coming home for me. And we've really grown Maverick. When we bought it, they had one hangar, 100,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet. It was full, and they needed help with growth. So we built a 30,000 square foot hangar to acquire more tenants. We doubled the size of our fuel farm, grew our fuel truck inventory. We service all the airlines but one in Sioux Falls. And then I was just talking about the sports complex, all the sports teams that charter in, they come in through Maverick. So we handle all those charters. One example is the PGA. Now with COVID, they airline charter from tournament to tournament to keep everybody in a bubble. Well, we do that through Maverick. And there's a big basketball tournament coming to Sioux Falls in November. So all those airline charters are going to come through Maverick. So it's kind of like, it's that one little piece in the Sanford kind of puzzle that ties everything together. And of course, for our own fuel pricing for AirMed and for corporate, I mean, we are buying our fuel at wholesale and saving cost on the backside of the operation.
Yes, right. I remember you were telling me about that before, and I'm sure prices are even less now, aren't they?
When you look at our department, it's payroll, maintenance, and fuel. Probably your top three biggest expenses. And we really now have created a different way of handling our fuel. And I really enjoy the Maverick side of the business, bringing companies in, the quick turns that come through, just meeting the different people. And it's a busy place. And it's really a fun part of the operation. That's
got to be a revenue positive.
Yeah. And it's been a great thing. And part of our system mentality is growing revenue outside of healthcare that can support healthcare. And part of that is the sports complex. It's Sanford Profile, which is the diet program. It's a full complement of food, coaching and all the equipment and tech that goes with it. And we have Sanford Frontiers, which is the for-profit umbrella that has Maverick in it. I think our system has a very interesting approach to the future and how to make healthcare successful and vibrant.
So do you have a director? What kind of staff do they have at Maverick?
So we have a base manager who manages the day-to-day, and we have our business development, and then we have our line staff. And it's really one of the fun things about the operation. It really is. I mean, I can still get out, park airplanes if they get really busy and short-staffed. It's right next door, so I can run over and help. Yeah. And I've grabbed a hose and fueled an airplane if I needed to, and I love interacting with the customers, and that's been really a fun project for us. Yeah. And maybe someday we'll grow it. We'll add Mavericks other places. Who knows? Yeah,
that's fabulous. So just a few more questions. I want to talk a little bit about what associations that Sanford belongs to. You're a member of the Association of Critical Care Transport, or ACT, and I know you're on the board because I served with you. You're currently serve as treasurer. How long has Sanford been a member of ACT, and what attracted you to the
just about 10 years now? And I think what attracted me to it back then was just kind of, I think we're really in a lot of the patient billing side of the world was really becoming very public, and our organization was really in line with ACT and kind of the grassroots patient-centered organization, and kind of getting back to that. And when I saw the opportunity for the board, I think I'm in my 9th year now. I'll term out after this year, but took a shot at it. And as you know, we served together for many, many years, and it's been really enjoyable being part of ACT. And I believe in our mission, and the programs that are part of the organization are like-minded, I believe.
Yep.
So yeah, after I finish this year, I'll definitely need to find somebody else from our program that can hopefully go for the board and get a seat on it.
Yeah, I didn't realize it had been that long for you.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah. And you've been treasurer for quite a while too, right?
I have. I've kind of called that my own. I think I'm in year 3 of doing the treasury. So maybe part of it is just trying to hide behind the treasury spot, but I like that spot. It's really a good board, and we've seen the people that come and go, and all great people. And it's a tough mission trying to move the needle, and the people are pretty dedicated to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of dedicated people. I especially like the standards and stuff too that ACT published. Yeah. So has Sanford been a member of the Association of Air Medical Services, or AIMS?
Yeah, we were a member of AIMS for a long, long time, and for a while we were both. And at some point, we all know about efficiency and in dollars, so we had to make a decision of which way we were going to go. And being a member of the board on ACT, we decided to discontinue the Ames piece and go with ACT. But still participate in AMTC, go to those things, and I think it's important that they've got their own complement of great things that they do. There's many of us that are CMTEs.
Yep.
I think we have 6 or 7 of us at AirMed that are CMTE.
Oh, excellent.
And I thought that was a great school, and we've sent several people through it. I just recredited last year, I think, for 3 more years. So yeah, but so they've all got their good things.
Yeah. So do you see Ames and ACT getting together in the future or working together more closely?
I hope so. I have to believe that there's common ground that out there where we can both find compromise. I think that will be the most effective way to create change from a federal perspective. If we can't, then I feel like it's a lot of more of the same.
Yeah.
And so I would like to see us being able to do that.
Yeah, it's tough. When I was at LifeLink, we were a member of both, and it seems like you're spending money fighting each other when so much of the stuff is common. And Ames has changed quite a bit, as you know. I'm on the Ames board now. Yeah. Or back on. I think it's the 3rd time I've been on the board. Are you a member of the Air Medical Operators Association or AMOA?
Yeah, we do a MOA, and like our director of operations on the rotor wing and our safety officer are more heavily involved in that side of it and kind of give us the updates on what's going on. And we are part of AMOA. Yeah,
that was I think a lot of it's what you have to have a Part 135, right?
Yep.
To be a part of that. What do you think the big benefit is? There a lot of shared information, or
definitely the shared information. I think we all have the same issues. I think by sharing what we're of a roadblock, someone else maybe already experienced it and found a solution. So we like to take that information in and make informed decisions anytime we can. And, we also will share information as well. We're in the beginning stages of becoming an FAA approved SMS and have a relatively new FOQA program of, flight operations, quality assurance.
Right.
The avionics and the King Airs we put G1000s in all of them now and got rid of the old packages so that we can record all the data, which has really kind of changed the game a little bit in the aviation world. And the 145s have that same technology as well. So we, because really quality seemed like it was really more centered on clinical, which it's heavily clinical. I mean, just you look at all the stuff that we track, but it's like, what do you do with aviation? And so we really taken a look at the most dangerous part of any trip is really the approach and landing phase. So we started just looking at what we do. And then we saw the numbers and we said, well, we can do better than that. So we've changed a lot of the way that we fly. And that's been kind of a big project. And I think we're really seeing the fruit from that now.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, the big news, we had arranged to do this podcast, but then I read that Intermountain Healthcare and Sanford going to merge in 2021. I'm going, oh my gosh.
I know.
And what I read is that the company would be headquartered in Salt Lake City, and Dr. Mark Harrison, who I don't know, but who is the president of and CEO of Intermountain, would be the president of the combined company. And I know it's probably too early for you to answer really any questions on what's going on, but has there been any talk with Intermountain Lifelight?
No, not yet. But interestingly enough, the week this was last week when the announcements were coming out, and Intermountain Lifelight was doing a transport from Rhode Island to Provo, and they picked Maverick for their quick turn spot. So, which was great. We saw them come in. I went over and chatted with the pilots, and great guys, and they had a great staff on board moving a patient back to Utah. And we were just chatting about our cultures. And I think, honestly, I really think it's a good strategy for our system. I think long term, how do you create, healthcare access, and how do you create the right health plan and the supply chain and research. And I think it's by getting with like-minded organizations. So
I was a real surprise, because I know you had gone through was it a year or two ago that you were looking at merging in Iowa, right?
Yep. And then that one just didn't come together.
Yeah.
And from the little bit I've been able to read about Intermountain and interact and looking at Life Flight, I mean, they have a really top-notch flight program as well. So another opportunity, you know, and I know that our footprints aren't really very close together, but I think it's an opportunity to see, you know, how do you do this? And, oh, that's a great idea. And just kind of, once again, looking at best practice opportunities. And I think it'll be interesting. We don't know much yet. I think we're at the letter of intent stage and moving through the due diligence, but I think it's always exciting. And every merger that we've been involved in has always turned out for the best, and I expect nothing less from Intermountain.
Yeah, I was just surprised. It just seems geographically further away, but is there some overlap on where their systems are?
You know, Intermountain is in Idaho, in Nevada, Utah, some Colorado, so probably not a lot, but I think there's a pretty good amount of space in between the two.
Yeah.
And who knows what the future holds, but I think looking at the long term in our organization and I think it really feels like it makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it should be exciting to see what happens.
Yeah. So anything else that you'd like to say about Sanford Air Transportation?
I appreciate the offer to come and talk about it. And you and I know each other a long time, and working from competing programs, the same footprint. I know that we've always worked well together. And,
yes.
And I've always enjoyed the conversation. And,
I've
AirMed.
I've always liked working with you, Mike. I mean, I think it's I've always been a big believer in working collaboratively. I mean, you can be competitors, but you can also we're there for patients, you know, right. And that's the primary thing, and to help each other out at times. That's important. But I always love doing these podcasts because I learn more about people, and didn't realize that you were flying or going out and filling up aircraft and stuff. So that's fantastic. I mean, I love your passion for what you do. It comes through very clearly, Mike. And
that's pretty exciting to work.
Yeah.
And I think one thing about Sanford is I always tell employees when we're either interviewing them or they're here already is if you don't like change, this is a terrible place for you.
Yeah.
It's the only constant we have, and I think it's just you have to embrace it. And
absolutely,
it's a fun place to be. We're very dynamic and changing and growing, and we get lots of neat opportunities. And so it's been fun. I love it, and can't imagine being anywhere else.
Yeah, well, it comes through very clearly. So, thanks again for being on the podcast, Mike. I really appreciate you taking the time from your schedule. I know you probably have a lot to do, and take care and be safe with this pandemic.
Thanks, Edward. Talk to you later.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Air Medical Today podcast. Please come back again and also subscribe to future shows by visiting the website at airmedtoday.com, iTunes, or on the Air Medical Today YouTube channel. Air Medical Today is also on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and you can find the links on the website. Remember, if you would like to be a sponsor or provide feedback, please write to webmaster@airmedtoday.com or call 612-367-6052. Special thanks to Stanley Reeves of Room Tunes for providing his song Track 5 for use as the theme song for the podcast. You can follow Stan on Facebook at facebook.com/stanley.reeves.39. Take care and fly safe.